Whispers on Steel, Book 1 of the Railway Inheritance, written by Melody Gilley. Chapter 1. Red Bank, New Jersey, 1965. Rain pelted the stained glass windows of St. Catherine's Church, creating a symphony of drums that echoed through the empty pews. Sonya Matthews sat alone in the front row, her mother's leather-bound journal pressed against her chest like a shield. The musty scent of wet wool and dying flowers filled the air, mixing with the lingering traces of morning incense. The journal was a testament to her mother's journey. Its burgundy leather cover was worn smoothly at the corners, and its brass clasp was tarnished from years of anxious fingers. Delicate gold lettering nearly faded away, spelling out records and observations in an elegant Victorian script. A thin green ribbon, frayed at the edges, marked a page Sonya hadn't yet found the courage to read. Tea stains and watermarks dotted the pages, each one a story untold, each wrinkle and crease a memory of her mother's hands. "Wake up, Sonya." What felt like a hand glided over the woman's forehead. "Wake up, my shining sun." Her mother's voice, soft and lifting with that trace of an accent she never quite lost, pulled Sonya into summer dreams. She was 16 again, dozing on the window seat of their small apartment. Afternoon light painted golden rectangles across the faded rug. The heat of July had made her drowsy after shelving books all morning. Mother. Sonya imagined she opened her eyes to the noonday sun. The warm summer breeze danced with the sheer white curtains among the floral wallpaper. Morning doves cooed in the trees. "You've been asleep for ages," Helena said, setting the tray on the small table. "I thought we might have our tea while the day is still with us." Sonya stretched, pushing herself upright. "I was dreaming about ships," she murmured, accepting the delicate porcelain cup her mother offered. It was part of the set Helena kept wrapped in tissue paper and only used for their private ceremonies. "Ships?" Helena's smile remained, but something flickered in her eyes. A momentary shadow. "Going somewhere exciting, were you?" "I don't know. I was watching them from the shore. They kept disappearing over the horizon." Sonya took a sip of tea, which was perfectly brewed as always. "Why do you never want to go to the ocean, Mother? New York is surrounded by water, but we never visit the shore." Helena's fingers tensed almost imperceptibly around her cup. "Some places hold too many memories, darling." She sat beside Sonya on the window seat, their shoulders touching. "But that doesn't mean you shouldn't go. Sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with watching ships disappear. Is that why you came to America? To begin a beautiful journey?" Helena was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "I came to America to give you possibilities." She set her cup down and took Sonya's hands in hers. "Listen to me, Sonya. There will be moments in your life when you must choose between safety and truth, between what is comfortable and what is right. Like in the books we sell?" Sonya asked. "The heroes always choose truth." Helena's laugh was gentle but held no humor. "Books make it seem simpler than it is. In real life, truth can be costly." She squeezed Sonya's hands. "But a life built on evasion is no life at all. Do you understand?" Sonya nodded, though she didn't. Not really. Not then. "Whatever you discover in your life, whatever truths find you," Helena continued, "face them with your head high. The Matthews women have steel in their spines, even when their hearts are breaking." "You're being very dramatic over afternoon tea, Mother," Sonya said, trying to lighten the sudden gravity that had settled between them. Helena's smile returned, warmer now. "Perhaps. But promise me you'll remember." "I promise." Helena reached up to cup Sonya's cheek, her palm cool against Sonya's skin. "My brave, curious girl. Whatever happens, whatever you learn about me or yourself, know that I have loved you with every fiber of my being. That will never change, no matter what else does." "I love you too, Mother," Sonya replied, puzzled by the intensity in Helena's eyes, the slight tremor in her voice. "Are you all right?" "Perfect," Helena said, composing herself. "Now, tell me about that book you were reading yesterday. The one with the detective in Paris." The memory dissolved as suddenly as it had formed. Sonya blinked, finding herself back in the hard pew of St. Catherine's Church, her skin feverish, her heart aching with fresh grief. The pastor was still speaking, his words about Helena Matthews' devotion to her daughter and literature, washing over the gathered mourners. "Oh dear." Sonya pressed the back of her frail hand to her forehead as she stared at the ceiling. "Perhaps that scarlet fever is upon me." She wiped the sweat from her brow. "Or it's in my head again." She sat straight up, brushing her blonde hair back. The dream clung to her like morning fog, refusing to dissipate even as reality settled in. Her slender fingers traced the journal's edges, and the hollow ache in her chest seemed to expand with each breath. Dark circles shadowed her blue-grey eyes, eyes that her mother always said were touched by the English rain, and her fair skin had taken on an almost translucent quality after weeks of grief-stricken insomnia. She found herself back in the church, the journal still clutched in her trembling hands. Its pages held secrets she hadn't yet dared to read. Her mother's own words, written in that precise English script, spoke of a life before America, before the war, and before Sonya. The black crepe dress hung loose on her frame, a testament to meals forgotten or ignored. Her mother would have fretted over this, would have pressed tea and scones into her hands with that peculiar urgency she always had about nourishment. A proper English breakfast, she would insist, even after 25 years in America sets the world right. Father McKinley's footsteps echoed against the marble floor as he approached, his black cassock a stark shadow against the grey light filtering through the windows. "Miss Matthews," his voice gentle, practiced in the art of consoling the bereaved. "The rain's letting up. Shall we proceed?" Sonya traced her fingers over the journal's worn spine, feeling the subtle indentations where her mother's grip had left its mark over the years. How many times had she watched her write in it, always turning away when Sonya entered the room? How many secrets lay buried in those pages, waiting like time bombs to explode? The church door creaked open, letting in a gust of damp air that rustled the funeral programs laid out on the wooden pews. 6 pallbearers waited outside with her mother's casket, their black umbrellas forming a solemn canopy against the weeping sky. Sonya stood, her legs unsteady beneath her black dress, and clutched the journal closer. In her mind, she could still feel that phantom touch across her forehead, still hear her mother's voice calling her shining son. A nickname whose origin, like so much else, remained locked in the mystery of her mother's past. "Yes, Father," she whispered, though her feet felt rooted to the spot. "We can proceed." But as she took that first step toward the door, toward the ceremony that would mark the final chapter of her mother's life in America, Sonya couldn't shake the feeling that she was not walking toward an ending, but toward something that had been set in motion long before she was born. In a country across the ocean, in the shadows of a war that had shaped her mother's fate. Each step felt like moving through water, her body both, leaden with grief and eerily weightless, as if she might dissolve into the rain-soaked air at any moment. Seagulls wheeled overhead as Sonya arranged the new arrivals in the front window of Harrison & Sons books. The salty breeze from the harbor drifted through the shop's open door, mixing with the familiar scent of aged paper and leather bindings. 2 weeks had passed since the funeral, and she'd fallen into a rhythm among the towering shelves and creaking floorboards, finding solace in the quiet company of books. The brass bell above the door chimed as Mr. Peterson shambled in, his daily newspaper tucked under one arm. He joined the usual morning crowd, a collection of retired men gathered around the reading table near the biography section, their coffee cups leaving rings on the worn oak surface. "Did you see this nonsense about the Russians?" Mr. Peterson's voice carried through the shop. "Testing bombs in the Pacific now. Mark my words, we'll all be speaking Russian by Christmas. Lot of hot air, if you ask me," Mr. Whitman countered, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Just like that business with the flying saucers in New Mexico." Sonya smiled to herself as she climbed down from the step-ladder. Their discussions were as predictable as the tide, Politics, communist threats, and occasional debates about whether television would spell the end of civilization. The familiar chatter had become oddly comforting, a reminder that the world continued to turn despite her loss. "Miss Matthews, Mrs. Harrison's voice came from behind the counter. "Would you mind handling the inventory in the back room? Those university textbooks need cataloging before the term starts." The afternoon passed in a blur of dust motes and stamped pages. By closing time, the setting sun painted the harbor waters in shades of amber and gold. Sonya walked home along Water Street, past fish markets closing for the day and dock workers heading to evening meals. The air was thick with the scent of salt and diesel fuel from the cargo ships, their heavy horns echoing across the water. The Fields house sat 3 blocks up from the harbor, a modest 2-story home with white clapboard siding and blue shutters. Sarah Fields, a robust woman with perpetually flour-dusted hands, had been her mother's closest friend in America. Now, she and her husband Tom had opened their home to Sonya, refusing to hear of her living alone. "There you are," 8-year-old Jenny Fields called from the front porch, where she was attempting to teach her younger brother Bobby how to play jacks. "Mama's making pot roast." Inside, the house hummed with its usual evening activity. Tom Fields sat in his armchair, still in his work clothes, drafting plans for the latest skyscraper project in Manhattan. Bobby had abandoned his jacks lesson to play with his toy crane, mimicking his father's work. Sonya climbed the narrow stairs to her room, the familiar creak of the 3rd step following her. Once inside, she pulled her mother's journal from her satchel. The leather was cool against her fingers as she settled onto the window seat, the harbor visible in the distance. April 15th, 1941. London is burning. The sirens wailed again tonight, and I watched from the cellar as our city turned to cinders. Richard insists we carry on as usual, that the railway must run despite the bombs. But I've seen the manifests. These aren't just passenger trains. What we're doing. God forgive us all. "Sonya, supper's ready." Sarah Fields' voice carried up the stairs. Reluctantly closing the journal, Sonya made her way down to the kitchen. The smell of pot roast and fresh bread filled the air, and Tom was helping Bobby wash his hands at the sink while Jenny set the table. "Oh, before I forget," Sarah wiped her hands on her apron and reached for an envelope on the counter. "This came for you today. Special delivery from England. Your Uncle Gregory." The envelope was thick, made of expensive cream-colored paper. Sonia's name and address were written in an elegant, slanting hand she didn't recognize. Her heart seemed to skip a beat as she turned it over, revealing a red wax seal impressed with what looked like a railway insignia. "Go on," Sarah urged. Her eyes were bright with curiosity. "What does your uncle have to say?" Sonia's fingers trembled slightly as she broke the seal, aware that everyone in the kitchen had fallen silent, watching. The paper inside was the same cream color as the envelope, and the letter began, "Thornfield Hall, Yorkshire, England. My dearest Sonya, I trust this correspondence finds you in tolerable spirits, though I know the weight of recent events must lay heavy upon your heart. Word of your dear mother's passing reached me through channels I maintain at Scotland Yard, and I confess it has stirred memories that afford me little rest. As your sole remaining blood relation and executor of certain family matters, I feel compelled to extend an invitation that perhaps should have been offered long ago. England calls for your return, dear niece. The ancestral stones of Yorkshire whisper your name, though you have never walked among them. You should know that your mother's departure from these shores years ago left certain affairs unresolved. While I dare not commit particular details to paper, I believe you are now of an age where you must be made aware of your inheritance, not merely in terms of worldly possessions, but in matters of consequence that have long shadowed our family name. The universities here would indeed welcome a mind as sharp as yours. Cambridge, particularly, has begun admitting more forward-thinking young women to its halls. But I confess my motives for extending this invitation run deeper than mere educational opportunities. Some questions need answering, Sonya, and documents must be reviewed by one of our blood. Your mother was wise to foster your independent spirit. Indeed, you stand at the threshold of an age when women will no longer be bound by the constraints of previous generations. Yet, I fear there are older bonds, obligations of blood and honor, that cannot be so easily cast aside. Consider carefully what I offer, not merely a home in England, but the key to unlock the truth of who you are, and why your mother fled these shores in the dark days of war. The answers lie waiting in my library at Thornfield Hall. A ticket for the SS Queen Mary sails from New York Harbor on the 30th of this month. It shall be held in your name at the White Star Line office should you choose to accept. Time is of the essence, my dear niece. Others watch and wait. Your most devoted uncle, Gregory Constant. Chief Inspector, Yorkshire Constabulary. Sarah Fields watched Sonia's face as she read the letter, her work-worn hands absently twisting her apron. The pot roast sat forgotten on the table. Steam rose into the cooling evening air. Chief Inspector? Sarah's voice wavered slightly. I didn't know your uncle was with the police. Sonya looked up, finding Mrs. Fields' usually ruddy face had gone slightly pale. Mother never mentioned. She rarely spoke of England at all. No, she wouldn't have. Sarah began serving the pot roast, her movements mechanical. Your mother was like that, everything locked up tight inside. Except for that first night, she arrived here at the end of 42, soaked to the bone from the rain, clutching that journal like it was made of gold. She paused, fork hovering over the vegetables. She mentioned a Gregory then. Something about railway manifests and German cargo. Tom Fields cleared his throat. Sarah. What? The girl deserves to know. Sarah set down her serving spoon with unusual force. Helena, your mother. She wasn't just running from the bombs, dear. That much I do know. She kept muttering about train schedules and missing cargo cars the night she arrived. Said something about the von Vogel's private line running straight through to... She trailed off. Through to where? Sonya leaned forward. Her dinner remained untouched. Losing the steam that hovered over the vegetables dissipated, and the roasted meat became dry. I don't remember exactly, but Sarah's eyes slid away too quickly. It was all so long ago. She never spoke of it again after that night. She began cutting her meat with a singular focus, though she did seem relieved when she heard about the bombing of the Yorkshire rail yard in 43. Jenny piped up from her end of the table. What's a von Vogel? Nothing for you to worry about, dear, Sarah said quickly. Eat your carrots. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Sonia's mind raced, combining this new information with the letter's veiled warnings. Her mother had worked as a secretary for the railway company. That much she knew. But manifests, German cargo, and why would a chief inspector be involved with train schedules? I think I'll turn in early, Sonya said, pushing back from the table. Thank you for dinner, Mrs. Fields. Upstairs in her room, Sonya sat cross-legged on her bed, the journal in her lap. The harbor lights winked through her window, boats swaying gently at their moorings. She ran her fingers over the journal's worn cover, tracing the faded gold lettering. The green ribbon still marked that unopened page, taunting her. As she changed for bed, her eyes kept returning to the journal. She brushed her hair, remembering her mother's hands performing the same ritual, always humming that strange melody. What had she called it? The night train to Dresden. Even then, always trains. Finally, in her nightgown, Sonya settled against her pillows and opened the journal to the ribbon's place. Her mother's precise handwriting filled the page. June 12, 1941. Manifest irregularities on the midnight freight to Berlin. Third time this month. SVV insists these are routine coal shipments, but the weight calculations don't align. Heavy cargo, yet the coal logs show standard tonnage. Gregory suspects, but no, I won't commit suspicions to paper. The von Vogel private line runs directly from the Yorkshire mines to the German border. Their family has controlled these routes since before the Great War, and none dare question their authority now. Later, discovered additional ledger in SVV's office. Numbers don't match official manifests. Gregory says to document everything but tell no one. Trust no one. The von Vogels have eyes everywhere, and their influence reaches beyond the railways. What we've stumbled upon. God help us if they discover. The entry ended abruptly, a dark ink blot staining the page's corner. Sonia's hands trembled as she turned to the next page, which was blank. She flipped through several more pages, all empty, until another entry appeared, dated 2 weeks later, discussing nothing but mundane office matters. Rain pattered against the window, echoing the hollow emptiness she'd felt since her mother's funeral 3 weeks ago. The desk lamp cast a warm circle of light as she leafed through her mother's journal. Helena's elegant script flowed across pages yellowed by time, accounts of a life in England that her mother had rarely spoken about, interspersed with cryptic references to railway schedules and mysterious meetings at a place called Whispering Pines. Her fingers paused at a rough edge where several pages had been torn out, the jagged remnants still visible in the binding. This wasn't the first gap she'd discovered. Throughout the journal, entire sections had been excised with surgical precision, creating mysterious chasms in her mother's narrative. What truths had been deemed too dangerous to preserve? Sonya ran her fingertip along the torn edge, as if touch might somehow reveal what had been written there. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper from the fragmented text that remained, incomplete sentences trailing into nothing before resuming days later, with no explanation of what had transpired in between. Sonya glanced at the letter from Uncle Gregory that had arrived just yesterday, a man she'd never met, writing from Yorkshire with his cryptic invitation and warning that what was hidden must now be found. Had he known about these gaps? Was this why he was summoning her across an ocean to piece together what someone had deliberately torn apart? The harbour fog was rolling in now, its mournful horn echoing across the water. Sonya closed the journal and hugged it to her chest, her mother's warnings from the past mingling with her uncle's cryptic letter. Whatever had happened in those wartime years, whatever her mother and Uncle Gregory had discovered, it had been serious enough to send her mother fleeing across an ocean. And now, 9 years later, Uncle Gregory was calling her back. Back to England, back to Yorkshire, back to whatever deadly secret lay hidden in those wartime railway manifests. The ticket for the Queen Mary would be waiting at the White Star Line office. Sonya glanced at her small travel case in the corner. Could she leave everything behind? But then, what was holding her here? The truth of her mother's past, and perhaps her future, lay across the Atlantic.